Hi there. My name's Jolene, and 18 months ago, my sister told me to keep my pregnancy a secret so I wouldn't ruin her perfect wedding. I disappeared from the photos, from their conversations, from the family altogether. But now, her husband's gone, the money's gone, and guess who they came crawling back to? Would you have stayed quiet like I did? Or walked away sooner? What time are you listening to this, and where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your story too. I hadn't been back in weeks, maybe months. Not since the last time I showed up and left with a forced smile and a stomach full of silence. But I came back this time because Lorraine said there'd be a small family dinner before Delaney's wedding. I wasn't sure why I said yes. Maybe some misplaced hope. Maybe I wanted to see if anything had changed. It hadn't. The house still smelled like lemon furniture polish and control. Everything in place, no creaks in the floor allowed to speak too loud. I stepped through the front door and heard the faint hum of conversation in the dining room. I turned toward the living room and froze. Above the fireplace, framed in brushed silver, was the new family portrait, Lorraine, Delaney, and Grant. The color scheme was warm, blush tones, soft lighting, smiles so perfect they felt manufactured. I wasn't in it, not just missing from the group pose, cropped. The original pose had space for 4. I knew because I had been there when they shot it. But in this version, I had been surgically removed. No mention, no replacement, just negative space where I had once stood. Nobody said a word. Delaney walked by behind me, pausing for a second. She looked at the portrait, then at me. "Isn't it lovely?" she said, like we were discussing curtains. Then she kept walking. I stood there for a long minute. My fingers brushed the hem of my coat. I didn't reach for the frame. I didn't speak. I just looked. They didn't even bother to pretend I was still part of them. Later, before dinner, Lorraine pulled me aside. Not in a cruel way. No raised voice, no direct insult. She just placed a hand on my arm and smiled that tight, glossy-lipped smile she reserved for people she no longer respected. "Sweetheart, would you mind cleaning up your social media, just a bit?" she asked. "People talk. We just don't want anything that could make Delaney's big day uncomfortable." I blinked. "What do you mean?" She gestured vaguely. "Old family photos. Ones with all of us. The past. It's not personal, Jolene. It's just optics, you understand?" I nodded slowly. But inside, something coiled and quiet began to shift. Back in the guest bathroom, I opened my Instagram, scrolled past birthdays, Christmas mornings, blurry selfies with Delaney where we both wore matching red sweaters. My thumb hovered over the delete button, and I deleted them. Not because I agreed, but because I didn't want them to see that I was still holding on. If they wanted a clean version of the past, fine. But I wasn't going to carry the weight of the edits for them. I thought that was the end of it. Until 2 days later, I got an email by mistake. It was from Delaney's wedding planner, forwarding final photo files to her graphic designer. Attached was a preview, labeled version 1 before edits. My name wasn't in the subject. I wasn't supposed to see it, but I opened it anyway. There I was, standing at the end of the family portrait, not smiling, just existing, barely in the frame. And then I saw it, the shadow on the floor. My outline had been there before they airbrushed it out. Delaney hadn't just picked a different photo. She'd paid someone to erase me. All trace, all presence, gone. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel surprised. I stared at the screen, then caught my reflection in the black of my phone. They didn't just cut me from the frame, they cut me from their future. The package came 2 weeks before the wedding. A flat white box, no return address, no note. Just left outside my apartment door, like someone had dropped off a favor they didn't want to be thanked for. I already knew what it was before I opened it. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a blush pink bridesmaid dress, size XS. I held it up to the light and let the silk catch against my fingertips. It was beautiful. Delicate straps, hand-stitched beading around the waist, and a tag that read, "Custom tailored." Custom, but not for me. No one had asked me to be a bridesmaid. There had been no text, no call, no dress fitting, nothing. Just this dress, in a size I hadn't worn since I was 17. I tried it on out of curiosity, knowing it wouldn't fit, but wanting to confirm the message. It didn't slide past my ribcage. I laughed, but it wasn't humor. It was hollow. I didn't cry. I didn't text anyone. I didn't throw it away. I folded it gently, pressed it back into the box, and slid it under my bed. Even the fabric refused to lie about who belonged. Later that night, I checked my old savings account, the one I had used during nursing school and hadn't touched in over a year. There was a $500 discrepancy. It wasn't a huge amount, but it felt familiar. It was the kind of missing that made your throat tighten before your brain could explain why. I pulled up the transaction history. There it was. A transfer made 2 weeks ago to a boutique I didn't recognize by name, but one that specialized in custom bridal couture. The gown Delaney had flaunted on Instagram last week, holding a glass of champagne with one hand, while Grant kissed her cheek in the caption, "To forever." My stomach flipped. I knew the exact cost. She'd tagged the designer. And I remembered then, Lorraine still had joint access to the account. She'd set it up when I was 19, told me, "It's safer this way, for emergencies." I guess this qualified as one. I didn't confront her in person. I left a voicemail, calm, direct, no one called back. Instead, I got a text from Delaney the next evening. She had sent a group message thanking all the amazing people who helped make this dream wedding possible. Then, separately, a private message to me. "Thanks for always playing your part quietly. It means more than you know." No Jolene, no sister, just that. Like I was a character in a production, a background piece with no lines. I typed out a dozen different replies, some biting, some clinical, one just filled with question marks. I erased them all. And then I did what I hadn't done the last time. I said nothing. The silence I sent back was the loudest thing I had said in years. The photo appeared on a Tuesday afternoon, tucked between wedding cake poles and honeymoon countdowns on Delaney's feed. There she was, Avery, caught mid-giggle, sitting on a park bench with a juice box in hand and her curls pulled back in a pink bow. The caption read, "Cutest little girl from the neighborhood. She almost looks like my niece." Almost. My thumb hovered over the screen. I didn't comment. I didn't message. I didn't scream, though something inside me splintered clean in two. Instead, I took a screenshot, stared at it until the battery warning blinked red, and let my hand fall to my lap like it weighed too much to hold. I hadn't taken Avery to that park recently. Not alone anyway. And I hadn't sent that bow with her that day, which meant it wasn't Delaney who took the photo. It was Grant. Miss Calloway confirmed it that evening over tea. He came by with Delaney's assistant, said he was doing community outreach for the spa launch. Seemed charming. She didn't know what that photo would be used for. Neither did I, until now. Delaney hadn't even seen Avery that day, hadn't touched her, hadn't said her name. But she'd let her fiancé parade my daughter as a prop to the world, just enough to seem nurturing, but not enough to acknowledge blood. It wasn't just erasure anymore. It was design, and Grant was behind it. That night, I pulled out a notebook from the drawer I hadn't opened since before I left home. I started listing things, not just big betrayals, small ones, the lies that came dressed in smiles, the accidental slip-ups that weren't, the slow, methodical way I had been edited out of their narrative. They hadn't just forgotten me, they had planned to. Sunday morning came and I went to service, not because I believed, but because I wanted to hear it for myself. Lorraine was radiant, as always. Her pearls matched her shoes, and her hair sat in perfect curls above a face that had never aged from the burden of self-awareness. She stood during announcements and thanked the congregation for their prayers over Delaney's upcoming wedding. She talked about flowers and unity and God's provision. She smiled at Grant's mother, nodded toward the choir, and paused dramatically before saying, "We are just so blessed." Someone asked from the back, "How's Jolene? Haven't seen her around?" Lorraine smiled again, softer now. "She's doing her own thing." That was it. No mention of Avery. Not even a nod toward the child who carried her name in middle form. I sat in the back row, hands folded, jaw clenched. I had come hoping for something. Maybe a slip, a sign of regret, a moment of humanity. But all I got was that smile. I was their firstborn. Their silence was louder than any disowning. The photo found me before the anger did. It came through a neighborhood group chat. A woman I barely knew sent it with a cheerful, "Look who made the spa launch extra adorable." And there she was, Avery, resting on Delaney's hip like she belonged there. Like she'd always belonged there. The caption Delaney wrote burned more than anything I'd read in months. "Our founder believes in family beauty," featuring the cutest guest of honor. I hadn't been told. I hadn't been asked. I hadn't even known Avery was missing that afternoon. Miss Calloway had offered to take her out for a walk around the block while I finished my double shift. I thought they were going to the corner cafe, not to be passed off as a marketing accessory. I scrolled through the comments. "She's gorgeous. Looks just like her aunt. Delaney, you're glowing. Motherhood suits you." My chest tightened. I pressed the phone against the table and stared at the grain in the wood. They didn't want Avery. They just wanted the story she could sell. I called Delaney, straight to voicemail. I didn't bother with a message. Instead, I opened a new tab and pulled up the community center's scholarship application. There was a small preschool program I'd heard about. Needs-based, local families, sliding scale tuition. Perfect for Avery. I filled out everything, clicked submit, and got flagged. "Duplicate application detected." What? I called the program director. She was kind, but curt. "It looks like someone else submitted an inquiry on behalf of your daughter last week. It was flagged because of conflicting information regarding guardianship and paternity." My voice shook. "Who submitted it?" A pause. Then, "A woman named Delaney Barnett. She noted the child's father is not listed and stated the application should be voided." I thanked her, hung up, stared into nothing. This wasn't about passive exclusion anymore. This was sabotage, strategic, preemptive. They didn't want my child to exist, but they still wanted to control her path. I didn't sleep that night. I opened a new email, typed Colton's address into the to line, attached a photo of Avery, just her in overalls chasing dandelions. No context, no begging. The body of the email was one sentence. "She looks like you when she laughs." I hit send. 5 days passed. Then, finally, a reply. "I wish things were different, but I can't be involved. I have responsibilities." No greeting, no name, just that. I stared at the screen, then shut the laptop without another thought. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I kissed Avery's forehead and tucked her into bed. I had been erased by my mother, rewritten by my sister, forgotten by her father. All that remained was me and her. The envelope was plain, cream-colored, with a return address from a bank I hadn't used in years. It was the kind of mail you almost throw out until your name sits too perfectly centered on the front. Inside was a welcome letter for a new investment account. My stomach tightened before I even read the rest. I hadn't opened anything. Avery sat in her high chair chewing a corner of toast as I flipped through the pages. There it was, my name, my social, a signature that looked so close to mine I could feel the pen in my hand. But I hadn't signed it. I knew that. My gut knew that. I packed a diaper bag, strapped Avery in, and drove straight to the branch. The banker was polite, too polite. She pulled up the information and clicked her tongue in sympathy when I asked about the signature. "This account was co-signed by Lorraine Barnett," she said, not even flinching. "Verification was done by internal reference. She's a long-standing client. There were existing authorizations from an earlier shared mortgage account." I stared at her. "That account was closed 4 years ago." She nodded slowly. "That's correct, but the access permissions weren't updated." I asked for a printout, took every page, walked out before my hands could start shaking. Back at home, I pulled an old memory from storage. I was 21. Lorraine had asked me to sign a few blank forms for house maintenance paperwork, something about co-ownership while I was still listed on the deed. "It's just a formality," she'd said. And like a fool, I believed her. My name was the last thing I thought I still owned. 2 days later, I went to the house. Not out of rage, not to shout or demand, just to place the truth between us and see who would look away first. Lorraine opened the door, surprised but not startled. "Jolene," she said softly, almost like she'd rehearsed the greeting. I didn't speak. I stepped inside, sat down, pulled out the file and laid it flat on the dining table. She looked at it, blinked. Then, "What's done is done. It helped keep things stable." I looked at her, at the woman who used to press orange slices into my lunch bag and whisper, "You were always my quiet one." "Did Delaney know?" I asked. The silence that followed was not hesitation, it was confirmation. She sighed. "Your sister needed security, and we couldn't risk Grant pulling out last minute. It was one signature." "One forged signature," I corrected. She didn't respond. I realized then that I hadn't just been erased. I had been used. Convenient, a placeholder until someone prettier or safer or more obedient could stand in my place. They used me to keep their house standing, then asked me to leave through the back door. I went back to the folder that night, the one I had started weeks ago, now thick with printouts, notations, and flagged pages. Most of it I'd seen before: bank statements, false signatures, loan applications that seemed to borrow my name like it meant nothing. But one document stopped me cold. The file name read, Barnett Holdings Initial Partner Agreement. I remembered it now, barely. Grant had bumped into me at the grocery store 6 months ago, all charm and small talk and flattery. He'd called it a simple opportunity, something low risk that could build passive income for Avery's future. I hadn't agreed. I hadn't signed. I was sure of that. But there it was. My name, my signature, perfectly forged. The language in the contract was vague, written with just enough corporate lingo to mask intent. Silent partner, non-disclosure, asset protection. It was buried in a sea of legal fluff, but I saw it clearly now. He didn't need my trust. He just needed my handwriting. The next morning, a small package arrived in my mailbox. No return address, just a brown envelope with my name typed in all caps. Inside was a USB. I knew before I plugged it in that it would be something designed to break me. There was only one file, a voice recording. I hit play. Grant's voice poured through my laptop like smoke under a door. Calm, measured, almost amused. "You always knew this was coming, Jolene. You saw the signs. You didn't stop it, so don't act like you're innocent now." He paused, then continued like he was reading from a prepared script. "There are emails, dates, conversations. And you? You were part of it. Your silence was consent. Your name was on the paperwork." He started listing numbers, companies, timestamps. Some were familiar, legit. Others were completely made up, fabricated to weave me into the mess he was unraveling behind the scenes. It wasn't just gaslighting, it was architecture. He was building a story where I was the second villain, the one who smiled while nodding, the one who knew and looked away. But he had made one mistake. He sent the story to me. I didn't delete the file. I backed it up twice, on a password-protected drive and in a cloud account under a different name. Then I printed the transcript, filed it, and stored it in the same folder marked "In Case." They erased me for their comfort. I'm keeping everything now, for my safety. The first sign wasn't a headline. It was Lorraine's voice on the phone, tight, clipped, 2 beats too slow when I asked how she was doing. "We're all fine," she said, but the words hovered in the air like they needed something to lean on and couldn't find it. The next sign came from Miss Calloway, who knocked on my door with a casserole and a rumor. "Grant hasn't been seen at his office in a week," she whispered, like it was classified. "Something's off." Then, by sheer coincidence, or maybe karma wearing a business suit, I ran into a former classmate from nursing school, now working at a local bank. She didn't say much, just enough to make the room spin. They're auditing some shared family accounts, quietly, emergency-level stuff. I didn't react. I didn't call Lorraine or Delaney. I didn't warn them. They'd spent a year pretending I wasn't part of the family. I would let them choke on what they couldn't see. It hit the news the following Monday. A breaking alert buzzed on my phone right as I was buckling Avery into her stroller. Local investor and groom Grant Holloway suspected in multi-million-dollar fraud. The footage looped all day. Grant stepping out of a car, being ambushed by a reporter, muttering, "No comment," before ducking into a building. I watched it all, holding Avery in my arms. No calls came. Not from Lorraine, not from Delaney, not even a single message asking if I had seen the news. Just silence. Then came the voicemail. Delaney's voice, frantic, ragged, cut through my phone like a knife that didn't bother being sharp. "They're freezing everything. Grant's gone. I don't know what to do." I replayed it twice, then again. A second voicemail followed, Lorraine this time. Jolene, can you call me back? Please, we might need your help sorting some of this out. She didn't say sorry, she said help. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. They had burned the bridge and now wanted me to carry them over the ash. I put the phone down without deleting the messages, without responding, without needing to. Because for once, I wasn't erased. I was the page they left blank, thinking they'd never need to read it again. The knock came just after Avery finally fell asleep, her breath soft against the blanket, her fingers curled around the edge like she was afraid the world might shift without her. I opened the door to a man in uniform, polite but urgent, holding a clipboard that carried the weight of my name. Miss Barnett? I nodded. You're listed as emergency contact for your mother, Lorraine Barnett, and sister, Delaney Holloway. I didn't say anything. He continued. There's been an incident. Mr. Grant Holloway is being sought in connection to financial crimes involving several local businesses. He's missing. The home has been flagged for immediate investigation. Your mother suffered a medical episode, and your sister, she's not in a stable state. We need someone to speak on their behalf. I blinked. Let the words settle. After erasing me, they wrote my name on the last page. I packed Avery's bag slowly, not because I was unsure, but because I knew I needed the act of folding onesies and organizing snack packs to keep my hands from shaking. I drove in silence. Avery hummed in the back seat, blissfully unaware of the collapse waiting behind a set of double doors. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and desperation. Lorraine lay in a gown that didn't match her polish. Her lipstick had bled into the lines around her mouth. Delaney sat curled in a chair, eyes glassy, the kind of stillness that only follows panic. Neither looked at me. I stood there with Avery on my hip, waiting. He's gone, Lorraine said without lifting her gaze. He took everything. I didn't ask who she meant. I didn't sit. I didn't comfort. Why me? I asked. She swallowed. Because you were always the only one who didn't need saving. I took a slow breath. Let the silence settle between us. And that's why you let me drown alone. Delaney finally looked up. Jolene, can you help? Just until we figure out the accounts. I don't have access, and Mom's... Lorraine cut in, her voice softer now. You can stay here if you want, just for a while, until things are... better. Avery stirred. I looked down at her, then back at them. I'm not here to fix this, I said. I'm here to make sure you don't drag us in again. Neither replied. I shifted Avery onto my shoulder, kissed the top of her head, and walked toward the door. They wanted me back in the picture, but I wasn't their background anymore. The news didn't come as a surprise. Grant had finally been arrested, caught at a private airstrip in Florida, trying to board a charter flight under a different name. The footage was everywhere. Him in cuffs, flanked by officers, his once tailored suit wrinkled and stained. The same man who told me, so calmly, that silence was consent. Now his name crawled across every screen in Athens. I watched the footage on mute, Avery sleeping on my lap, her weight pressed into my chest like an anchor I chose to carry. No calls from Delaney, not even a message from Lorraine. Just a town humming with headlines and the kind of gossip that doesn't feel like justice, just noise. And in all that noise, I heard it. What they didn't say. They got what they deserved. But that doesn't mean I got what I needed. 2 weeks later, I drove back to the house I hadn't set foot in since the hospital. The porch still sagged in the corner, where we used to sit during summer storms. The wind chime was gone. So was the welcome mat. Inside, it smelled like dust and decline. A casserole dish sat untouched on the counter. 3 picture frames were missing from the wall, like someone tried to erase evidence of better days but stopped halfway. Lorraine walked out slowly. No lipstick, no pearls. Just a cardigan and a question. Do you hate me? I didn't answer. She looked older, smaller. But guilt shrinks people in strange ways. It doesn't make them softer, just quieter. A text came in while I stood there, from Delaney. I'm sorry, I didn't know how to fix it. I typed a reply. It's not yours to fix anymore. But I didn't send it. Instead, I reached into my coat pocket and placed something on the table between us. A tiny red shoe. One Avery had outgrown, worn through on the toe from chasing leaves. Lorraine didn't ask what it meant. She didn't have to. A week later, I walked Avery through the community park. The air smelled like cut grass and blooming things. She gripped my finger with her whole hand, looking up at the sky like it might hold answers. A neighbor I barely knew smiled at us and asked, "Is that your niece?" I didn't flinch this time. "No," I said, smiling back. "She's my daughter." Forgiveness is not always reconciliation. Letting go is not always peace. But this is mine. They wanted me to disappear. Instead, I became everything they couldn't erase. Sometimes the deepest betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from the people who swore they loved you. I've learned that silence can be louder than words. And being erased doesn't mean you stop existing. It just means you start existing for yourself. To anyone watching who has ever been the quiet one, the invisible one, or the scapegoat, please hear me when I say, you are not weak for walking away. You are powerful for choosing peace over permission. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to rebuild yourself from the ground up? What would you say to the version of you that stayed silent for too long? If this story touched your heart, leave a 1 in the comments, or tell me where you're watching from. And if it didn't, I'd still love to know why. Your voice matters here. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story that just might remind you you're not alone.